are no longer in Florida. We are in Blue Ridge Mountains, and we are going to be getting in some mountain streams and rivers and looking for a species of giant salamander known as the hellbender. So we're gonna be spending 2 nights out here camping, 3 days in the river, snorkeling around, looking for salamanders. Hopefully across these 3 days, we get some good stuff. So hope you guys enjoy the video. I will see you out there. After suiting up, I headed out to a downstream section of the river. The water was cold and clear, and as the sunlight filtered through the rapids, it illuminated an aquatic realm characterized by colorful boulders and stones, all sculpted smooth by the rushing waters. The water appeared to sparkle in the sun as flakes of mica sailed downstream, suspended in the current. Although mountain streams and rivers aren't the usual destinations for snorkeling, there's an abundance of life to be found hiding in the ribbons of water that spill down the slopes and valleys of the Appalachians. Much of the life in these aquatic habitats are small, but the salamander we are looking for is anything but. After a good while of snorkeling, I came across a recent hellbender skin shed. We were definitely in the right place. And not long after, I found him. The eastern hellbender is the largest species of salamander in North America. They are entirely aquatic and can grow to nearly 2 feet in length. Their coloration varies from dark brown to a rusty orange, with some individuals showing hues of green, purple, and red. Despite their size, however, it still takes a trained eye and a great deal of patience to spot them amidst the rocky substrate of their mountain stream habitat. Their variable colors and markings provide them with incredible camouflage, and they remain essentially invisible to the average hiker trekking the trails alongside their habitat. I luckily managed to stumble upon several individuals. They were mostly darting in and out of holes in the rocks, but it was clear that the energy in the water was building. Something was about to go down in this unassuming Blue Ridge River. Not far away, there was a large boulder that I noticed had a familiar-looking face sticking out from underneath it. Sure enough, the largest hellbender I have ever seen poked its head out of the hole. This hellbender is a male, and he's going to be the main character of this video. We'll call him the Den Master. The reason for this is down the hole beneath this boulder is a den. It just so happens to be hellbender breeding season, and dominant male hellbenders will use burrows and holes beneath rocks as dens. This is what we are here for, not to touch or interfere with the salamanders at all. Instead, we are simply observers trying to film and photograph the dramatic and violent dance that is hellbender combat. During breeding season, males will guard their dens ferociously from rivals as they wait for a female to arrive and lay her eggs inside the den. The male then fertilizes the eggs and continues to guard them while they develop. As you'll see, competition for choice dens is fierce, but our den master is ready for it. After a quick patrol along the riverbed, he retreated back into his lair, enjoying the peace and quiet before what will be a wild afternoon. A few hellbenders were hanging out in the area, but so far they were keeping their distance from the den master, and wisely so. With things being mostly quiet in the downstream section of the river, I hiked over a mile to a promising upstream stretch to look for more hellbenders. This section of the river was flowing much faster, and it was difficult to navigate against the current. There were quite a few species of fish hanging about, including a particularly large trout. It wasn't long before I located another den with a watchful male guarding its entrance. He was much smaller than our den master, but seemed to be the dominant individual of the upstream section. A few other hellbenders showed up as we explored nearby. Although they were interested in the den, no conflict or fights erupted, but it was interesting to watch them all battle the strong current. Every now and then, I would look up and see a giant salamander come sailing down the river like this fellow. At this point, a smaller feisty male flew down right through the middle of my frame. Not far away, we came across a rather pale-looking hellbender that had a stump for a back foot, and was also apparently in the middle of shedding its skin. This individual didn't seem too prepared for a fight, and before too long, he had disappeared at the edge of the river. Well, I can't be everywhere at once, but man, I was sure trying. Back down the river I went to see if things were heating up with the den master in the downstream section. My friends Bryce and Bill were waiting patiently outside the den master's lair. Bill had been in the same spot for hours, waiting to capture the perfect picture of hellbenders locked in combat. He had even started playing with river rocks to help pass the time. Although we all absolutely love it, we definitely do sit in the same place for quite a while sometimes, waiting for action to happen. The den master was lurking at the entrance of his den, as if he knew what was about to happen. All of a sudden, hellbenders began appearing from all different directions in the river. I looked down at one point and realized one was actually right beneath me, and it had definitely not been there 5 minutes before. The wandering hellbenders were nearly running into each other as they got closer and closer to the den master. Finally, one salamander approached the den, and we were certain a fight was about to start. However, it apparently was a female, as the den master allowed her to freely enter inside the den. This attracted the attention of all the other salamanders in the area, and they started flooding into the den. And this time you can really tell it's a male based on the swollen area at the base of his tail. This is a salamander's cloaca. Basically, it's an all-around hole, if you know what I mean. Both male and females have them, but the males tend to get pretty swollen and kind of look like a donut. We couldn't believe it, but a fourth hellbender actually forced his way down into the den. The dens can be decent sized, but they aren't made for 4 hellbenders. Suddenly, hellbenders began flying back out of the den. And as another male approached the den's opening, the den master came roaring back to the entrance. Quick snaps sent the newest intruder swimming downstream. It was time for the den master to get to work. The den master began methodically chasing down each challenger, and what ensued was unbelievable to witness. Hellbenders usually breathe through their skin, taking advantage of the high surface area on their bodies due to the folds of skin on their sides. However, the effort of fighting off the rival salamanders caused the den master to have to swim to the surface to gulp air. He completely ignored us as he raced around, wreaking havoc on his competition. Every nearby male successfully scared away, the den master took one last trip to the surface before sinking back down and taking a well-deserved rest. All right, so pretty good first day. Getting all that action around that one den is pretty awesome. Unfortunately, things kind of slowed down in the afternoon, but sometimes that's just how it is. So yeah, hopefully we'll get some more stuff tomorrow and the next day. I didn't quite get some of the cinematic shots I was hoping for. Plus it's hard when it's a small space, and yeah, hopefully we'll have some other opportunities next couple of days. So that's it for day one. Day two is up next. It was a little too rainy and wet that evening to have a fire, but that didn't keep us from gathering around a little light on the picnic table and talking about cameras, photography, wildlife, and traveling late into the night. But then it was time to go to bed. Good morning. It is day two, and I'm gonna run out and try and get a few drone shots of the river before we start doing more underwater stuff. So yeah, hope we find a good section and get some cool bird's eye view shots. The appropriately named Blue Ridge Mountains lie toward the southern end of the Appalachian mountain range, which runs along the eastern side of the U.S. from North Georgia up to Maine. Parts of the Blue Ridge Mountains are temperate rainforest habitat, as this region meets the average annual rainfall and temperate requirements to be categorized as such. This area is known for an incredible diversity of salamanders, both terrestrial and aquatic. Beneath the dense tree canopy of the wet and rolling forested hills lies a remarkable network of mountain rivers and streams. Aquatic habitats might appear unassuming at first, but their clear rushing waters are filled with life. Fish, insects, crayfish, salamanders, frogs, snakes, mussels, and so much more live here. And I've seen colors on fish in these streams that rival that of coral reefs. These pristine aquatic habitats, shielded on both sides by dense forests, provide the perfect aquatic habitat for America's only species of giant salamander. It's amazing how many wild stories take place just beneath the surface of these Appalachian waters. Day two starts now. I'm gonna go in with my 100mm macro lens for starters. Hopefully get some close-up shots before any of the real action starts going once things warm up. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully Hellbenders is still going crazy. I started out looking for some of the smaller details in the river, like this hogsucker going to town sifting food from a pile of sand in the riverbed. There are a few darters hurrying about as well. The den master was in his usual spot. It seemed like he was considering coming out on patrol, but he never ended up leaving his burrow. At this point, I was convinced it was going to be a slow morning in the river, but then one of our friends called us over to a particular rock just up above the den master. At first, we weren't totally sure what we were looking at. Then we realized that tucked under the rock were two hellbenders, and one was latched firmly onto the tail of another. The two hellbenders stayed in the same position for quite a while, twitching every now and then as the one adjusted its grip. I have no idea how long they'd been locked together. The trapped hellbender began to attempt to squirm away from the jaws of its opponent. With one final struggle, the hellbenders came out from under the rock into the open water, and what happened next is one of the most wild scenes I have ever had the privilege of filming. Having finally escaped from the jaws of the dominant hellbender, this individual paused to rest and recover from the battle. You could see the wound left behind from the sharp teeth of the other male, as some of the blood was carried downstream before quickly coagulating in the cold water. These salamanders may seem just slow and slimy, but they are remarkably strong, and during breeding season, it takes all of their strength just to compete and survive. I was pretty excited to have witnessed this fight, and after taking a few other macro shots of another hellbender that was hanging out in the area, decided it was time to get out. My friend Matt found this incredible hickory horn devil caterpillar that had fallen in the water, which he quickly picked up and set on some plants alongside the river. Alright, so pretty great morning so far. Got to see one good fight, which is a lot for that early in the morning. I just threw my wide angle back on, hopefully get a new perspective of more action. When I got back in the river, it seemed as if everything had calmed down for the most part. There weren't any hellbenders out in the open, and the den master was not leaving the entrance of his den. So my friend Andrew and I decided to head upstream a short ways to an occupied den that he had found the day before. When we arrived at the site, we were heartbroken at what we found. The den had been completely destroyed. Here's a photo of what the den had looked like just the day before. It was clear that the den had been destroyed by humans. There were huge chunks of clay that had been broken off and ripped out, and the burrow had clearly been dug up. Even sadder yet, we found strings of hellbender eggs floating helplessly near the den. We guessed the hellbenders had been poached, although it's possible someone dug up the den just to access the salamanders without realizing it was breeding season, but it's hard to tell. There are even eggs streaming out of the den itself. It's important to not stack, take, or flip rocks in these habitats, as just like in this case, it can destroy hellbender homes and wipe out an entire clutch of eggs. Andrew did his best to put the eggs back into the den, and we did what we could to reinforce the entrance, but we both knew it was unlikely they would make it. Well, that sucked. Find that. Yeah, that was really sad to see. Especially messed up because it was a den that was full of eggs. So really important for this population to bring in a new cohort of salamanders. And now that the den's been destroyed, the eggs are more vulnerable. There's no adults there guarding it. Chance of survival for those eggs is way smaller, and it's already tough surviving in the wild. So yeah, that's a good example of why I'd never share locations. I'm just trying to show you guys adventure and the beauty of the natural world and why it's important that we learn about it and love it and protect it. So my friend Andrew is a fisheries biologist, and he's going to report that sighting and send that up the chain. So hopefully that'll add some more protection for this particular region and the hellbenders here. That was a pretty big bummer. We're kind of feeling down now. The rain's kind of picked up a little bit, but hopefully we'll get back out for one last try this afternoon. I made the trek from camp back to the upstream section of the river, and sure enough, the rain did pick up. As soon as I stuck my head underwater in the upstream section, I could tell the visibility had dropped quite a bit. I got pretty lucky and stumbled right across the green hellbender I'd seen the day before. If I hadn't snorkeled right over it, there's no way I would have ever been able to find it. The visibility all of a sudden plummeted. When I first got in, I could probably see about 5 feet, but now I could barely see my hand in front of my face. Clearly it was time to call it for day 2, and just wait and hope that the river cleared up for day 3. Although the day had started amazing, the poached den and the rain had kind of put a damper on things. After it got dark, we went back down to the river to make sure no poachers were digging up dens, and thankfully we didn't see anyone. In order to end the night on a high note, we decided to go on a hike through the forest and look for some terrestrial salamander species. The hike was incredible, and we ended up seeing close to 50 salamanders with about 8 different species.
Oh, sweet. Oh. Almost there.
The salamanders here
Diversity
really.
is so cool.
favorite of which is the northern red. Such an incredible little amphibian. And then it was time to go to bed. Good morning. It is day 3. Promise it's actually day 3, and I'm wearing the same clothes, but when you're wearing a stinky wetsuit for like 8 hours of the day, it just, things like that don't matter anymore. But anyway, time to pack up, go for some hellbenders, and then head back to Florida. I started the day in the upstream section. The visibility still wasn't great, but it was a huge improvement from during the rainstorm yesterday. The dominant male in the area was still busy guarding his den, and the green hellbender was still there, hanging on for dear life in the current. Not far downstream, I discovered a new, smaller den that was occupied by a small hellbender. Another individual appeared to be attempting to track down the den, but apparently he decided to avoid potential conflict or just couldn't quite find it and headed off in the opposite direction. Another hellbender was headed upstream straight towards him, but they stopped just 6 feet apart from each other. I waited hopefully, wanting to capture one last sequence of hellbender action, but nothing happened. Spending so much time in the river and being worried about packing as much into the trip before having to go back to Florida and to work, it's easy for me to be a little impatient and wish for the salamanders to just start fighting. But I have to remind myself that for the hellbenders, this is a matter of life and death. You can't rush survival, and I'm incredibly grateful for all the amazing behavior I was already able to witness. Before leaving, I headed back to the downstream section. At this point in the day, the water was golden as the sun streamed below the surface. I checked on the den master again. He was in his usual place at the entrance to his den. Not far away was another individual curled up on the river bottom. I took a second just to appreciate what an amazing animal was in front of me. In one sense, they aren't terribly attractive to look at, but in another sense, I really think they're one of the most beautiful creatures I've ever seen. It's hard to imagine the Blue Ridge Mountains without the hellbender. With climate change promising more intense storms like Hurricane Helene, on top of all the other challenges amphibians already face, I'm worried the Blue Ridge Mountains could eventually lose one of its greatest natural treasures. And I can't help but wonder, wouldn't we do anything to keep that from happening? Also, this is what walking a total of 8 miles in a few days in a wetsuit will do to your knee pits if you've ever been thinking about doing it.